and welcome to chapter 1. You guys made it through the first week. I appreciate that. I appreciated all your videos, and except for one or two little problems with the videos, they all were really good. One of the questions that I asked you though was why you were in this class. And a lot of you answered honestly that you're required to be in this class. And I totally understand that you have to be in the class or speech, but nobody wants to take that class because you guys are all afraid, even though you shouldn't be. What I want you to do though, as we're going through the book, is try and figure out why your department said you needed to be in this class. What is it that you need to pull out from this book, from this class, that's going to help you in your career later on, right? So put that as an underlying thought. So I'm going to just go over chapter 1 really quickly. Supposedly you've all read it by now, right? And then I just want to highlight some of the points on this, right? So communication is very, very important. You know, we all can learn to be a more effective communicator, even me. There's a study at the very beginning of the chapter talking about Frederick II, who wanted to know if a baby was born and wasn't influenced by his parents, what language would that baby speak? And so it was Frederick's thinking that he would speak Latin or Hebrew or the language of God or something, or German, right? But in fact, he did a study, so he took a bunch of babies that, orphaned babies, and put them into a room and didn't let anyone talk to them. There was no communication around them. There was no kichichiku. There was no love, nothing. They just fed the babies and kept them healthy as much as they could. And the sad thing is that all those babies died, because that's how important communication is to us. And even as a kid, we know that. You know, what's the biggest problem or punishment a little kid can give another little kid on the playground? I'm not going to talk to you. We're not talking to you. Don't talk to him. You start crying, because that's so important. So there are 4 reasons why we communicate. The first reason is a physical need. It affects our health. And as little as 10 minutes of talking face to face on the phone and stuff improves memory and boosts intellectual function. Now you're thinking, it's like, okay, I don't talk that to many people, especially with this whole COVID thing. And that's one of the problems that hospitals are having right now in nursing homes, is that because of the lesser amount of communication that's happening, people are not healing as well and as quickly as they were before. You know, people with strong relationships have a significantly lower rate of coronary disease, regardless of whether they smoke, drink, or exercise. Socially isolated people are 4 times more susceptible to the common cold. Now, the other reason we talk and communicate is for identity needs. It's a major way we learn who we are. We don't have a sense of ourselves without that. The third thing is that social needs. That's how relationships are created. Communication is a primary goal of the human existence. There's a strong link between the quality of communication and the success of a relationship. And the 4th reason we communicate is for practical reasons. It's essential for success in everything we do, in our careers, in our love lives, in our families, everything. So it's a process though. And communication is about using messages to generate meanings. So there's a model for this, and it's called the transactional communication model. And it's on page 11 if you want to turn there. The model of communication used to be where there was a speaker who sent a message to a receiver, and it went back and forth. But that's like talking with a walkie-talkie or a Nextel. And we really found out that really they're both communicators, and they're both sending messages at the same time. One may be speaking, but the other one is still communicating. Whether they're rolling their eyes, they're looking at their cell phone instead, whether they're crying, whether they're laughing, there's a message coming back and forth with this. So you're sending and receiving messages at the same time. And the meanings exist in and among people. You know, when somebody says, I'm sorry, because they showed up hours late for a date or a meeting, there's meanings for that. Is it a general apology? Is it just an insincere statement they feel they needed to say just to get over with? Are they being sarcastic? It's easy to imagine that your friend might mean one thing and you might have a different interpretation of that. And the environment and noise affects our communication. So this noise could be literally a bar that's too loud. Or it could be noise going on in your head. You know, somebody's talking and it's like, okay, I've got more important things in my mind than what you're saying, right? Or it could be that you're not feeling well. That all could be noises. And the channels make a difference too. You know, how we communicate. Are we face-to-face communicating? Are we using the phone? Are we emailing? Are we texting? So my brother just texted me, and he'll be mad that I told you this, but my brother just texted me that he has shingles, right? And he's had them before, but that's okay. So I text back, it's like, what? When it happened? How are you? So I like 20 questions and nothing. So I call him. I'm like, what is going on? And he goes, I'm texting you back. I'm not as fast as you are. My fingers are fatter, right? So it makes a difference. So we got to have the conversation because I couldn't wait. I needed those answers right away. Now, some communication principles that we have, one is it's transactional. It's a dynamic process. It's an interaction with each other. And our communication can be intentional or unintentional. Sometimes our communication is very deliberate. You even plan it. It's like, okay, when I see the person, I'm going to tell them, kind of make that. But a lot of times it's unintentional. You yawn. You just sent a message, right? You're sweating or blushing. Boy, you just sent a message. And our communication is irreversible. Everybody has this like, boy, I wish I wouldn't have said that. Boy, if I could take that back. But communication is like toothpaste. Once it's out of the tube, it's out there. And it's also unrepeatable. I'm going to tell stories all through this whole semester. And I'll do the best I can, but boy, if you would have been there, it would have been way better. Even if I would have brought a friend who was there too with me, still, it would have been way better if you would have been there. You had to be there, right? And then communication has a content dimension and a relational dimension. And the content dimension involves the information that's being discussed. The relational dimension expresses how you feel about the other person, whether you like or dislike them, whether you're in control or you feel subordinate, or you feel comfortable or anxious. And this is where it's not what you say, but how you say it, right? So the message might be, I'm sorry, but how you said it, how I interpret how you said it is going to make that message different. So some characteristics of interpersonal communication. One is that it's unique. We all communicate differently than each other, and that's fine. There's an interdependence in communication. You have to have more than one person to really communicate. Another thing that it distinguishes is that there's self-disclosure. You're sharing important feelings with others. And there are intrinsic rewards. So we want our interpersonal communication to be unique and interdependent and have self-disclosure and be intrinsic. Now, some misconceptions that we talk about here in chapter 1 is that not all communication seeks understanding. When you say, hey, how you doing? And somebody actually stops you and starts telling you how they are, right? That's not what you were doing. You were just being nice and saying, how are you doing? You're supposed to say, fine, how are you? Great, and you just keep walking. But when they grab you and go, oh, you didn't hear, right? Sometimes you don't want to know everything. Many attempts to influence others. You know, sometimes we try to make sure that what we're saying is really what we want the other person to mean. And sometimes we're deliberately ambiguous or deceptive. You know, we're not actually telling a lie, but we're not actually telling the truth. We also need to know that more communication is not always better. You can talk a problem to death. Sometimes you just need to walk away from it. You're done with the conversation. And then communication is not going to solve all your problems. Even if the best plan, best time communication, there still could be a problem. Sometimes clear communication even causes more problems. And effective communication is not a natural ability. Some people are better at it than others. So to be a competent communicator, somebody who is both efficient and appropriate, you have to know that there's no single ideal or effective way to communicate. We all have tools in our tool belt, and you have to know which one it is to use. Sometimes the best communication is to yell at somebody. Sometimes it's just not to say anything and hold them. You have to know what the best communication is. And competence is situational. Sometimes you're very competent in one situation. That doesn't mean you're going to be competent in others. People can come to you and say, oh, you're really good at this. And you're like, that's not what I'm really good at. And then competency can be learned. Maybe that's why we're in this class. So the characteristics of this competent communicator is that they have a large repertoire of skills. They are adaptable. They're able to perform those skills successfully. And there's an involvement, a commitment with it. And they're also empathetic. So empathy is a real big thing, and you're going to run into this word a couple different times. Empathy and sympathy are two different things. Sympathy is just that you're sorry for something. I am sorry your dog died. Empathy is when your dog has died and you know exactly how they're feeling. And then you also have a cognitive complexity, which is the ability to construct a variety of different frameworks for viewing an issue. You also self-monitor yourself. Am I talking too quickly? Which I tend to do. Am I talking too loudly? Is this appropriate? And then we need to talk a little bit about social media and interpersonal communication. We are drifting towards more communication through social media than face-to-face. And especially in this time of COVID, there are a lot of people I have not seen for a long time that I've only been able to text, happy hour by phone, phone call. So it makes it different and harder to communicate effectively. And part of it is there's a leanness to it. Your words that are typed out don't have all of the voice and the facial expressions that are part of the communication process. And we also realize that our communication can either be at the same time, where it's two-way and recurs in real time, or it can occur when there's a time gap between when messages are sent and received. When you're sending a text message and you don't hear back from the person for a day or two. Whereas if you were talking to them, you would get that message right away. And there's also a permanence with this. So when you send a text message, you realize that later on when you say, oh, I didn't say that, and they whip out their phone and go, that's what that says right there. So is social media inferior to face-to-face interaction? It just depends what you're using it for. There's a great chart on page 29 of the characteristics of communication channels and what works really well and what doesn't work really well. You should probably look at that. That's a good thing. So to be a competent communicator in social media, be careful what you post. I have a good friend whose mother on Facebook will go very governmental, and I just call my friend and say, okay, your mom's at it again. And he'll call her and it's like, Mom, take that down. Well, it's true. It's like, Mom, please just take this down, kind of thing. So realize you need to be careful what you post. And be considerate. There is an etiquette, right, of what you need to do with social media. And then respect others' need for undivided attention. It's hard when you're on your cell phone or when you're on a video chat and you realize the other person's doing something else too. Or all of a sudden they just disappear or their eyes are closed, right? Keep your tone civil. Make sure that you're not all explanation points on everything. Be mindful that other people can overhear you or read your text messages. And then balance mediated and FaceTime. FaceTime is still very, very important. All right, so that is just my brief overview of Chapter 1. Remember tomorrow, or well, not tomorrow, depending on when you look at this, Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock, I'm going to have an office hour. So that would be, if you want to email something, I'll be able to answer you right there. I'll be at my computer between 9 and 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. So I hope to hear from you then if you need me. If not, you have a quiz at the end of the week on this chapter, and you also have a log to write, and that's in the teacher guidance portion of it, and then you'll need to respond to 2 other people's logs. Have a good week. Thank you.